The woman who did not ask him to be smaller. Claire Bennett's first act inside the Moretti estate was to pull Chicago's most intimidating man 3 inches forward by his tie. It was not a deliberate act of courage. Her heel had caught the edge of a hand-woven rug in the marble foyer, her suitcase had rolled in the opposite direction, and Adrian Moretti's tie had happened to be the only object within reach. Claire grabbed it. Adrian lurched toward her. She collided with a chest that felt less like a person and more like a wall wearing an immaculate charcoal suit. The entire entrance hall fell silent. Claire did not need to look around to know people were watching. She could feel it. The guards near the doors, the housekeeper at the foot of the stairs, the 2 elegantly dressed guests who had paused beside a console table. She slowly lifted her eyes. Adrian Moretti was even larger in person than in photographs. He was well over 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, built with the kind of natural mass that made most furniture look undersized. Dark hair was brushed back from a serious face, and a trimmed beard sharpened a jaw that seemed designed for disapproval. His eyes, almost black in the evening light, moved from Claire's face to her fist. Her fist was still wrapped around his tie. "Oh," Claire said. She let go so quickly that she nearly lost her balance again. Adrian's hand closed around her forearm before gravity finished making its decision. Behind him, a man in a navy suit made a suspicious sound that might have been a cough. Claire looked past Adrian. "If that was a laugh, I would like the record to show that I have been in this house less than a minute." The man in navy straightened. "Matteo Rinaldi, head of security. I never laugh on duty." "You have a terrible poker face, Matteo." Adrian's mouth changed by half a degree. Claire pointed at him before common sense could intervene. "You almost smiled." "I did not." "You absolutely did." The 2 elegant women near the entrance exchanged a glance. Claire recognized the look immediately. She had seen versions of it at restaurants, office parties, clothing stores, and weddings. It was the look people used when they believed a woman with a soft body should understand that confidence was a privilege she had not earned. But this time the glance was not aimed only at Claire. It was aimed at Adrian too. That interested her. 3 weeks earlier, when Elena Moretti had called and invited Claire into the strangest arrangement of her life, she had warned her that Adrian inspired 2 kinds of stories. Men talked about his influence. Women talked about his body. Claire had refused to ask for details. She knew too well how quickly a human being could become a rumor with a face. Now she was standing beside the man at the center of those rumors, and what struck her was not his size. It was the way he waited. Adrian had caught her easily, yet the moment she found her balance he released her and took one careful step back. He did not touch her suitcase until she nodded. He did not ask why she had stared at him. He did not make a joke to claim control of the room. He simply said, "Your trip was comfortable?" "Mostly." Matteo looked at the ceiling. Claire narrowed her eyes. "Do not." Adrian turned toward him. "What happened?" "Nothing important." Matteo sighed. She asked the driver to stop because she saw a bakery. It was a very convincing bakery. It was a pet store. Claire looked offended. There was bread in the window. "For dogs." Adrian looked away. This time there was no question. He was smiling. The warmth vanished almost immediately, but Claire had seen it, and so had everyone else. That was the first crack in the legend of Adrian Moretti. It would not be the last. The room Adrian gave Claire was larger than her entire apartment back home. It had tall windows overlooking the gardens, a fireplace framed in pale stone, a sitting area, and a dressing room that could have comfortably housed a small family. Adrian carried her suitcase inside, set it near the wardrobe, then returned to the doorway. He did not cross the room again. Instead, he placed a brass key in her hand. "This door locks from the inside. The staff will knock. Matteo will knock. I will knock. If you want privacy, you have it." Claire looked down at the key. Something tightened unexpectedly in her chest. Her former fiancé, Grant Mercer, had once treated access as proof of love. At first, it had seemed flattering when he wanted a key to her apartment. Later, the key became permission to arrive without warning, inspect what she bought, ask why she had not answered a message quickly enough, and open drawers that did not belong to him. If Claire protested, Grant called her secretive. If she became angry, he called her sensitive. Adrian Moretti, a man half the city described as dangerous, was giving her the power to lock him out. "Thank you," she said quietly. His gaze stayed on her face for a second, as though he understood the gesture had landed somewhere deeper than he intended. He did not ask why. That mattered too. The arrangement itself was simple, at least on paper. Claire would live at the estate for 3 months. She and Adrian would spend time together openly, without a wedding date, without a public engagement, and without financial dependence. At the end, either person could walk away. No penalty, no debt, no expectation. Elena Moretti had designed the arrangement after announcing that her grandson had spent too many years letting family politics choose women for him. Claire had met Elena at a charity event the previous spring, when Claire had organized a community fundraiser and calmly refused to move a wheelchair-accessible table to make room for a donor's decorative display. Elena had watched the entire argument, then asked Claire to sit with her for coffee. Months later, after several conversations, she made the outrageous suggestion. My grandson needs a woman who is not impressed by money, frightened by silence, or allergic to telling him when he is being an idiot, Elena had said. Claire had laughed. Apparently that was when Elena decided she was perfect. The idea should have been easy to reject. It was not. Claire had spent the last year rebuilding her life after Grant. Her work as an event consultant was stable. Her apartment was comfortable. She had friends, routines, and a growing sense that peace could be more attractive than romance. Then her father had died unexpectedly, leaving her a box of documents she had barely opened and a final letter from his attorney asking her to review several old files when she was ready. The grief had made the edges of her life feel temporary. So when Elena offered Claire a strange 3-month detour, she surprised herself by saying yes. Maybe she wanted adventure. Maybe she wanted distance from the apartment where every drawer seemed to contain something that reminded her of the past. Maybe she was simply curious about the man who had agreed to a courtship designed almost entirely around giving her reasons not to stay. At dinner that first evening, Claire met Elena again and learned quickly who actually ruled the Moretti estate. Elena was small, silver-haired, elegant, and entirely unimpressed by her grandson's reputation. I heard about the tie, she said before Claire had finished sitting down. Claire closed her eyes. Matteo studied his plate. Adrian said, there is nothing to discuss. Then why is Matteo smiling? I am not, Matteo said. Claire pointed at him. That family trait is contagious. Elena laughed so hard she had to set down her wine glass. For several minutes the table felt almost ordinary. Then Elena asked, have you heard the stories about Adrian? The change in him was immediate. His shoulders did not move. His expression remained controlled, but something shut behind his eyes. Claire noticed. I have heard that Chicago has a remarkable number of people with nothing useful to do, she said. Elena's mouth twitched. Adrian looked at Claire. I have heard rumors, she continued. I have not heard facts. There is a difference. No one spoke for a moment. Then Claire reached for the salt and knocked her spoon to the floor. The tension broke. Adrian picked up the spoon, placed it beside her plate, and said, very quietly, you should declare war on gravity. At least then the conflict would be official. Claire stared at him. Matteo stared at him. Elena looked delighted. Was that a joke? Claire asked. No, you are very bad at lying. So I have been told. Later that night, Adrian found Claire in the library and offered her a car home. Not as a threat, as an exit. If you have seen enough to decide this was a mistake, no one will think less of you, he said. Claire looked at the quiet man standing several feet away from her. You expect me to leave? It would not surprise me. That is not the same thing. No, do you want me to leave? His silence lasted just long enough to answer. Claire closed the book in her lap. Then stop trying to make the decision for me. Something moved across his face. Not anger. Recognition. Claire stood, walked toward the door, turned the wrong direction, took 3 steps, and returned. Adrian silently pointed toward the opposite hallway. Do not ruin the moment, she warned. His eyes warmed. I would not dare. During the first week, Claire learned that Adrian Moretti was a collection of contradictions. He could end a tense business call with 6 words, then spend 20 minutes repairing the clasp on Elena's favorite bracelet because she refused to let anyone else touch it. He could make a room full of executives sit straighter simply by entering, then kneel on the carpet so Matteo's little daughter, Sophia, could pin a paper crown on his head. He owned restaurants he rarely visited, a construction company he monitored obsessively, and a charitable foundation he pretended was entirely Elena's project even though Claire caught him reviewing scholarship applications after midnight. He remembered which housekeeper had a son applying to college. He knew the name of the gardener's aging dog. He disliked sweet coffee, but ordered strawberry pastries every morning after discovering Claire loved them. He also avoided standing too close to her whenever possible. That part became impossible not to notice. If their hands brushed, Adrian pulled back first. If Claire sat beside him on a sofa, he adjusted his posture as though calculating the precise amount of space required to keep her comfortable. Once, while passing behind her chair, he stopped rather than squeeze between her and the wall. Claire had to tell him there was enough room. He looked almost embarrassed. At first, an old insecurity whispered that perhaps he was not attracted to her. Grant's voice returned from memory with cruel efficiency. Certain dresses are more flattering. Maybe stand behind me for the picture. Are you sure you want dessert? I am only trying to help. Claire hated that the voice still knew how to sound reasonable. Then one evening, she came downstairs wearing a deep blue dress for a foundation dinner, and Adrian forgot the sentence he was saying. Only for a moment. But Claire saw it. Matteo saw it too. Elena definitely saw it. Attraction was not the problem. Fear was. Adrian Moretti was afraid of getting too close. The question was why. Claire found the ring boxes by accident. This time, she really was looking for the library. She opened the wrong door and discovered Adrian's private study. She should have left immediately. She intended to. Then she saw a narrow drawer standing partly open beneath an antique cabinet. Inside were 4 velvet boxes. Claire stopped. Curiosity won for exactly 5 seconds. She opened one. A diamond ring rested inside. The second box held another. The third, another. The fourth was empty except for a folded jeweler's receipt. Claire felt the humor disappear from the situation. For attempts. For women. For pieces of evidence that Adrian had once allowed himself to believe something might work. You are lost again. His voice behind her was quiet. Claire turned. Adrian stood in the doorway without his jacket. His expression was calm, but the calm was not real. I should not have opened this, she said. No, I am sorry. He crossed the room, closed the drawer, and said nothing else. That silence made the apology feel heavier. For the next several days he became exceptionally polite. Claire quickly learned that Adrian's politeness was often a wall wearing a good suit. He still appeared at meals. He still asked whether she needed anything. But the small moments of humor disappeared. Claire did not push. Instead, she let time do what questions could not. By the end of the first month, the estate had begun to change around her. Books accumulated beside chairs. A ceramic mug appeared in the library and stayed there for 2 days. Claire brought fresh flowers into a sitting room no one used. Sophia left crayons in the breakfast room. Elena started taking tea downstairs again because, as she put it, there is finally something interesting to listen to. Adrian's house had been designed for important people and quiet meetings. Claire made it feel lived in. Adrian noticed. He also noticed that Claire rarely apologized for eating, laughing, or taking up space when she was comfortable. Only strangers could still make her shrink. At a foundation reception downtown, a donor's wife looked Claire over and said, "You are very confident to wear a dress like that." The words sounded like praise. They were not. Claire smiled automatically, an old defense. Before she could answer, Adrian stepped beside her. "Claire chose the dress because she likes it," he said. "That seems like enough reason." His tone was mild. The woman flushed and excused herself. Claire looked up at him. "You did not have to rescue me. I know. I could have handled her. I know that too. Then why did you say anything?" Adrian's gaze followed the departing woman. "Because people become very comfortable being cruel when everyone else pretends not to hear them." Claire had no answer. A few minutes later, he led her confidently through a set of doors and directly into a storage hallway. She stared at the stacked banquet chairs. Adrian stared at them too. "This is not the ballroom," Claire said. "No. Do you know where we are?" "No." She laughed until she had tears in her eyes. Adrian endured it with dignity for nearly 10 seconds before laughing too. That night, something shifted between them. Not love. Not yet. But trust had begun to find a place to stand. The construction accident happened midway through the second month. Adrian had to inspect a Moretti development site near the river after a safety audit flagged problems with temporary supports. Claire went with him because she had spent 2 weeks listening to him call every trip outside the estate boring, which she had learned meant he preferred not to worry about her. The site manager was walking them through a partially completed atrium when a steel brace snapped with a violent crack. Workers shouted. A section of temporary framing shifted. Adrian moved before anyone else finished understanding what had happened. He did not perform some impossible feat of strength. He did something better. He took control. He ordered power cut to the area, sent one supervisor to call emergency services, and directed workers away from the unstable frame. When they discovered a carpenter trapped behind a fallen support, Adrian joined 3 men stabilizing a secondary beam while rescue crews made space to pull the worker free. His size helped, but Claire saw that his judgment mattered more. He knew exactly how much force to use and when not to use it. When the worker was finally carried out conscious, his young son, who had been waiting with a relative outside the trailer, ran toward the scene crying. Adrian stopped several feet away and crouched. He did not reach for the boy. He held out one hand and waited. The boy eventually took it. Claire watched Adrian lead him toward his father. For weeks, people had reduced Adrian to measurements: height, shoulders, hands, weight, strength. Standing in the dust beside the river, Claire saw what those measurements could not describe: restraint, care, control, protection. Adrian looked across the site and caught her staring. His face changed. The warmth vanished. He misunderstood the look instantly. By the time they returned home, the wall was back. Claire had finally had enough. She found him alone in the kitchen after midnight. "You keep doing that," she said. Adrian looked up from a glass of water. "Doing what?" "Deciding what I think before I say it." "I do not." "You absolutely do." He set down the glass. "You saw me looking at you today and decided I was frightened." His silence confirmed it. Claire folded her arms. "I was impressed." "That is not better. It is if you stop treating every feeling like a trap." His jaw tightened. Claire softened her voice. "What happened to you?" Adrian looked toward the dark window. For a moment, she thought he would walk away. Then he said, "Vanessa Romano." Claire knew the name. She had met Vanessa at a family dinner weeks earlier, a polished brunette who spoke to Adrian with the strange familiarity of someone who had once owned access to him. Adrian told the story without drama. Vanessa had been the third serious match his family encouraged. Unlike the women before her, she had stayed long enough to make him trust her. Adrian had spent his entire adult life aware that his body entered a room before his personality did. People expected force from him. Some were fascinated by his size. Others were intimidated by it. Vanessa convinced him that none of that mattered. So Adrian told her what he had never told anyone else. That closeness made him anxious because he was terrified of overwhelming a woman he cared about, physically or emotionally. He had spent years learning control in every other part of his life. Intimacy felt different because it required trust instead of discipline. Vanessa had reassured him. Then their engagement ended. Within weeks, private details became social entertainment. The facts changed as they traveled. The whispers grew crueler. Women who had never been alone with Adrian discussed him as though he were a spectacle. The fourth match knew the rumors before meeting him. After that, Adrian stopped knowing whether a woman was looking at him or at a story someone else had placed in her head. Claire understood the ring boxes now. Not for failed romances. For times he had allowed hope into a room where judgment was already waiting. He looked at her. "If you want to leave, I will arrange it." Claire nearly laughed from frustration. "Do you actually want me gone?" Adrian said nothing. "Then stop offering me exits every time you become afraid." His eyes sharpened. Claire took one step closer. "Grant spent 2 years telling me my body was a problem he was generously willing to help solve," she said. "He never called me ugly. He was too clever for that. He suggested smaller portions, different clothes, better angles. He wanted me behind him in photographs. He wanted me grateful when he touched me in public and ashamed when I wanted to be seen." Adrian did not move. Claire continued, quieter now. "By the time I left, I thought love was something people gave you after you edited yourself enough." She placed a hand over his chest. "You were told you were too much. So was I." Different words. Same wound. His breathing changed beneath her palm. "Maybe the problem was never that we were too much," she said. "Maybe we spent too long around people willing to offer too little." Adrian looked at her as though the sentence had found a place in him no one else had reached. Claire lifted her face. He did not move toward her. Of course he did not. Even now he would not assume permission. So Claire closed the distance herself. Their first kiss was quiet. Careful. Almost formal at first. Then Adrian exhaled, and something in him finally loosened. When they separated, Claire saw an expression on his face she had not seen before. Hope. That was when she understood the real risk between them. Not scandal. Not family. Hope could hurt them because it meant they had finally found something worth losing. The envelope arrived 2 mornings later. It sat beside Claire's coffee with no stamp and no name except hers. Inside were photographs of Adrian with former fiancés. Vanessa appeared in one. Across the back, someone had written, "Ask her why she left." Claire's first reaction was not jealousy. It was alarm. The Moretti estate had controlled gates, cameras, scheduled deliveries, and security protocols that Matteo treated like religion. An anonymous envelope beside her breakfast meant someone knew the household's routines well enough to reach her without entering the house personally. Matteo arrived within minutes. By the time Adrian returned from a meeting, every delivery from the previous day was being reviewed. Adrian looked through the photographs in silence. Claire watched him prepare for judgment. Instead, she asked, "How did they get this inside?" He looked up sharply. It was not the question he expected. The answer came before noon. The envelope had been concealed inside a flower shipment ordered for the breakfast room. No intruder had crossed the gate. Someone had bribed an employee at the floral distributor. That discovery should have been reassuring. It was not. The sender still knew exactly which vendor Elena used, and exactly where the flowers would be unpacked. That evening, Claire's phone displayed a message from a number she had blocked months earlier. "Grant Mercer, I heard you were in Chicago. We should talk about your father's papers." Claire stared at the screen. For the first time, 2 parts of her life touched that had never belonged in the same room. Adrian noticed her expression. "What is it?" Claire hesitated, then showed him. "My father left me financial records. I have barely opened them. Grant used to ask about his work sometimes. I thought he was being polite." Adrian's face became still. "What kind of work did your father do?" "Forensic accounting. Corporate audits. He worked for banks, construction firms, anyone who paid him to find money people wanted hidden." Adrian looked toward Matteo. Matteo was already reaching for his phone. Claire's stomach tightened. "What? Your father audited a Moretti development partnership 5 years ago," Adrian said. "I remember his name." The room seemed to narrow. Claire had never known. The next afternoon, her father's attorney confirmed it. Thomas Bennett had been hired to review a joint redevelopment fund connected to Moretti Development. During the audit, he discovered a pattern of false invoices and shell companies. He believed someone inside the partnership was stealing from multiple investors and moving the money through charities and consulting firms. One of the consultants was Grant Mercer. Claire sat perfectly still in the attorney's office. Grant had begun dating her only months after her father started that audit. The timing was impossible to ignore. Her father had never accused Grant directly. Instead, he had moved copies of the records into a secure archive and left access instructions among Claire's inheritance documents. Grant had spent 2 years trying to become part of her life, while quietly searching for something she did not know she possessed. The realization hurt in a different way than heartbreak. Claire had believed Grant's control came from insecurity. Now she understood that some of it had been strategy. He had wanted access. Her apartment. Her father's office. Her documents. Her trust. Adrian watched her absorb the truth and did not touch her until she reached for his hand first. That restraint nearly broke her. The next weeks changed the atmosphere at the estate. The 3-month arrangement continued, but romance was no longer the only thing. Unfolding. Matteo's team worked with attorneys to secure Thomas Bennett's archive. Claire reviewed her father's notes. Adrian kept his business separate from her decisions and refused to pressure her into handing over anything. "If the records are yours, you decide what happens to them," he said. Grant sent 3 more messages. Claire answered none. Then Vanessa Romano called. Claire expected hostility. Instead, Vanessa sounded tired. "I received photographs too," she said. "Of you." Claire went cold. Vanessa admitted the truth about the old gossip. She had betrayed Adrian's confidence years ago, not because she feared him, but because she had panicked after their engagement became politically inconvenient for her family. She had repeated a private conversation to a friend, expecting sympathy. The friend repeated it again. By the time Vanessa understood what she had done, the story belonged to everyone. "I was cruel," Vanessa said. "Not brave enough to admit it then. I am now." Claire did not forgive her for Adrian. That was not hers to do. But Vanessa gave Matteo something useful. The anonymous sender had contacted her through a consulting company registered to an address associated with Grant Mercer. The mystery was no longer a mystery. Grant was trying to destabilize Claire before she could discover what her father had left behind. He believed Adrian's history was the easiest weapon. He had underestimated both of them. Near the end of the third month, Claire had to meet her father's attorney to sign documents transferring the archive to an independent legal custodian. Adrian offered to send Mateo. Claire refused Mateo personally, but agreed to 2 security escorts. "I am not becoming a prisoner because Grant wants me afraid," she said. Adrian hated the decision. He respected it anyway. That was the difference between protection and control. Claire understood it now. The meeting itself was uneventful. The danger came afterward. A fire alarm sounded in the office tower parking garage. Staff directed everyone toward a secondary exit. One of Claire's escorts was diverted by building security after a vehicle collision blocked the ramp. The second followed Claire. Toward the street, a man in a security jacket approached and said the primary sidewalk was closed. Claire took 3 steps toward the side corridor before noticing his badge had the wrong company logo. She stopped. The man's expression changed. Claire turned to warn her escort. Someone behind her pulled the fire door shut between them. The next minute was confusion rather than spectacle. An alarm, echoing concrete. 2 men blocking the corridor, Claire shouting, her escort forcing the door, a vehicle waiting at a service entrance. Claire fought long enough to drop her handbag and press the emergency button on the bracelet Mateo had insisted she wear. Then she was pushed into the vehicle. By the time Adrian received the alert, the 3-month arrangement had 3 days left. He would remember that detail for the rest of his life. Not because it mattered legally, because Claire had spent nearly 3 months teaching him not to expect departure, and suddenly the one woman he had finally trusted had disappeared. Mateo arrived in Adrian's office with Claire's broken bracelet in an evidence bag and did not waste time pretending everything would be fine. The signal transmitted before it was damaged. "We have a location trail for several minutes." Adrian stood. There was no shouting. That frightened Mateo more than anger would have. Grant's message arrived soon after. "Come alone. Bring the archive access." Adrian read it once. Then he handed the phone to Mateo. "I will go alone." Mateo looked at him. Adrian added, "To the front door." Mateo almost smiled. Claire was being held in an unused office above an old freight warehouse on the south side. Her wrists were secured in front of her with plastic restraints. She was frightened, but fear had not erased her ability to think. Grant entered wearing an expensive coat, and the same calm expression he had once used when explaining why Claire should change dresses before dinner. For several seconds, she simply looked at him. "You dated me for my father's files." Grant sighed. "It did not begin that way. Do not insult me twice." His mouth tightened. There he was, the man beneath the polished concern. Grant explained that Thomas Bennett had discovered records capable of exposing a network of embezzlement, bribery, and false companies. Grant had expected the files to disappear after Thomas died. Instead, the archive remained sealed. Then Claire moved into Adrian Moretti's home. Grant panicked. "If Adrian sees those records, he will destroy everything I built." Claire laughed once, without humor. "You mean everything you stole?" Grant leaned closer. "You still do not understand what kind of man Moretti is. I understand him better than you ever understood me." Grant's expression hardened. He tried the old methods. He reminded Claire of Adrian's failed engagements. He suggested Adrian only wanted someone grateful enough to stay. He implied that Claire's body made her easy to manipulate because she should be flattered by powerful attention. Years earlier, those words would have found every unprotected place inside her. Now they sounded small. Claire realized something almost peacefully. Grant had never actually known her. He had only known which version of her was easiest to control. "You spent years making me smaller so you could feel important," she said. "Adrian has never asked me to become less of anything." Grant's face changed. That was how Claire knew she had finally taken away the only power he understood. Below them, a warehouse door opened. Footsteps echoed through the building. Grant looked toward the stairwell. Claire's heart began to pound. Adrian entered the warehouse alone, exactly as instructed. He wore no jacket and carried no visible weapon. He did not need theatrics. He simply walked forward with the controlled stillness Claire had once mistaken for coldness. Grant's men watched him carefully. Adrian stopped where Grant could see him from the upper office. "I brought what you asked for," he called. It was a lie. The archive was already in the custody of attorneys Grant could not reach. But Grant did not know that. What he also did not know was that Mateo's team had entered through a loading bay on the opposite side after tracing the warehouse through the company Vanessa had identified. Adrian was not there to win a fight. He was there to keep Grant looking at the wrong door. The power cut out. Emergency lights flashed on. Grant cursed and reached for Claire. She had spent the last 10 minutes rubbing one edge of the plastic restraint against a broken metal bracket beneath the chair. The restraint finally snapped. Claire stood and shoved the chair into Grant's path. He stumbled. She ran. Not gracefully. Never gracefully. But fast. She reached the stairwell just as Adrian came up. For one suspended second, neither moved. Then Claire crossed the distance and collided with him. Adrian caught her. The same arms that had steadied her in the foyer now closed around her as though the world had narrowed to one task. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, Claire. I am scared. I am angry. My dignity is somewhere under a warehouse chair. But I am not hurt." His forehead dropped briefly against hers. Behind them, Mateo's voice carried through the corridor as his team secured the building and detained Grant's men for the police already waiting outside. Grant appeared at the far end of the hall, desperate and furious. Adrian moved Claire behind him. Grant stopped. For a moment, Claire saw the man everyone feared. Not because Adrian attacked, because he did not need to. He stood between Grant and Claire with absolute certainty. "You are done," Adrian said. Grant looked toward the exits and finally understood there was nowhere left to go. The arrest was quiet compared with everything that had led to it. Claire preferred it that way. The records Thomas Bennett preserved eventually helped prosecutors dismantle Grant's financial network. Moretti Development recovered stolen funds. Several shell companies were closed. Vanessa provided testimony about the consulting company Grant had used to contact her. Adrian kept Claire's name out of public statements wherever possible. Most importantly, he did not decide what recovery should look like for her. He asked. Sometimes she wanted him nearby. Sometimes she wanted a locked door, a cup of tea, and an hour alone. He respected both. 3 days after the warehouse, the original courtship agreement expired. Claire found the contract on a small table in the library. Beside it was the brass key Adrian had given her on the first day. Adrian stood by the window. "You are free," he said. Claire stared at him. "I was always free." "Yes." "Then why do you look like you are about to attend your own funeral?" A faint smile touched his mouth and vanished. "Because I want you to stay. And after what happened, I do not want you wondering whether gratitude made the choice for you." Claire's anger softened before it could fully form. He was not pushing her away this time. He was protecting the meaning of her answer. So Claire did something neither of them expected. She left. Not forever. For 1 week. She went back to her apartment. She met friends. She worked. She slept in her own bed. She opened the curtains in the morning and made coffee without guards outside or Elena criticizing the strength of it. Adrian did not call unless Claire called first. He did not send flowers. He did not send a car. He did not appear outside her building in some grand romantic gesture. He gave her exactly what he promised. Space. By the 4th day, Claire missed the estate. By the 5th, she understood that she did not miss the marble floors or the money or even the strange safety of Mateo's constant vigilance. She missed Elena shouting from another room. She missed Sophia's drawings. She missed strawberry pastries appearing beside coffee. She missed Adrian standing too far away until she pulled him closer. She missed the home they had accidentally built inside a house that had once been afraid of being lived in. On the 7th day, Claire drove herself back to the Moretti estate. She wore flat shoes. This felt important. Adrian was waiting in the foyer, though he pretended he had simply happened to be there. The dangerous rug was gone. Claire looked down at the empty marble. Coward. Mateo removed it. Of course he did. Adrian's gaze stayed on her face. Hope and fear stood side by side in his expression. Claire walked toward him. "I left because you asked me to choose without pressure," she said. "So I did." He did not breathe. "I choose the man who gives me a key and understands it can lock him out. I choose the man who does not confuse protection with ownership. I choose the man who buys the wrong amount of pastries because he thinks subtlety is a personality trait." Adrian's mouth moved. Claire stepped closer. "And I choose you because I love you. Not because I owe you anything. Not because you rescued me. Not because your grandmother is terrifying. You." For once, Adrian Moretti did not prepare for goodbye. He reached for her slowly. Claire met him halfway. Their second beginning was quieter than their first. No falling suitcase. No tie around a fist. No audience. Just a choice made clearly and returned freely. Adrian did not propose that day. That was another thing Claire loved about him. They spent the next several months building something that did not need urgency to prove it was real. Claire kept her apartment for a while. Adrian kept a drawer empty for her until she was ready to fill it. She resumed work and took on larger events, including several for the Moretti Foundation. Adrian attended some and complained about all of them. Elena claimed every successful development as evidence of her own genius. Matteo kept the dangerous rug permanently in storage. Vanessa eventually met Adrian privately and apologized. He did not restore their friendship, but he accepted the apology without allowing the past to control the future. Claire respected him more for that than she would have respected revenge. Grant Mercer disappeared into courtrooms, legal filings, and consequences that no longer belonged in Claire's daily life. That was the best ending she could have imagined for him. Irrelevance. The proposal came in early autumn, almost a year after Claire had first entered the estate. Adrian took her to the riverfront construction project where the accident had happened. The building was complete now, glass, stone, sunlight, and a public community center occupying the lower floors because Adrian had quietly redesigned part of the development after the injured carpenter recovered. They stood on a terrace overlooking the city. Claire was talking about a foundation event when Adrian said her name. Something in his voice stopped her. He held a small velvet box. Not one from the old drawer. A new one. Claire looked at it, then at him. You waited, eh? Long time. I wanted to be certain I was asking because I was ready, not because I was afraid you might leave. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Adrian lowered himself to one knee. There was no crowd, no family alliance, no contract, no deadline. Claire Bennett, he said, will you build a life with me that neither of us has to become smaller to fit inside? Claire laughed through tears. That is an unfairly good question. Is that a yes? Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Claire admired it for 3 seconds before saying, you know Elena is going to claim responsibility for this. She already has. Matteo too? He selected the route here to reduce tripping hazards. Claire stared at him. Adrian finally laughed. Their wedding took place the following spring at the estate. Elena promised restraint. No one believed her. The gardens filled with flowers, family, foundation staff, construction workers, old friends, and people who had watched Adrian's house slowly become a home. Claire wore a gown that followed every curve without apology. She did not stand behind anyone in photographs. She did not wonder whether she looked smaller from a different angle. She did not hear Grant's voice in her head. Adrian waited at the end of the aisle looking calmer than any groom had a right to look. Matteo stood beside him. Elena sat in the front row with a handkerchief she insisted was for allergies. When Claire reached the beginning of the aisle, she saw Adrian glance at her shoes. She raised an eyebrow. He looked innocent. Halfway down, the hem of her dress caught beneath one heel. Claire paused. A ripple of concern moved through the guests. Adrian took one step forward automatically. Claire recovered before she fell. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Adrian held out his hand. He did not rush to catch her. He offered. Claire smiled and took it. Together, they walked the rest of the way. Years later, Claire would remember that as the truest moment of the day. Their story had never really been about a powerful man saving a clumsy woman. It had been about two people learning the difference between being caught and being carried, between being protected and being controlled, between being desired and being accepted. Adrian did not need Claire to make him gentle. He had always been gentle where it mattered. Claire did not need Adrian to make her confident. She had always possessed the courage. She had simply spent too long apologizing for using it. The estate changed permanently after the wedding. There were books on tables now. Coffee cups appeared where they did not belong. Sophia's drawings occupied an entire wall in Adrian's study. Elena continued to interfere with everything. Matteo started a private list of objects Claire nearly knocked over and Adrian caught before disaster. Claire discovered the list and objected to the total. Adrian refused to take sides. That was wise. The 4 old ring boxes eventually disappeared from the drawer. Adrian did not throw them away in anger. He returned the stones to the jeweler and donated the value anonymously to a program supporting women leaving controlling relationships. When Claire learned what he had done, she did not say anything for a long moment. Then she kissed him and told him the decision was annoyingly perfect. Most importantly, Adrian stopped counting departures. He no longer watched disagreements for signs of an ending. He stopped assuming silence meant judgment. He stopped treating his body like something that required a warning before anyone could choose him. Claire changed too. She stopped moving to the back of photographs. She wore bright colors when she wanted. She ate dessert without calculating whether someone might be watching. She kept the brass key Adrian had given her on the first day even after the locks were changed. It remained in a small box beside her wedding ring whenever she took the ring off at night. The ring represented a promise. The key represented something deeper. Choice. Years earlier, Gran had taught Claire that access could be used as control. Adrian had taught her that love could stand outside a locked door and wait to be invited in. And Claire had taught Adrian something equally difficult. A closed door was not always abandonment. Sometimes people needed privacy. Sometimes they needed time. Sometimes they came back because they wanted to. The city continued telling stories about Adrian Moretti. Powerful men always attracted stories. Some people still mentioned his size. Others still remembered old rumors. But those whispers no longer mattered inside the life he had built. Because Claire had never fallen in love with a rumor. She had fallen in love with a man who knew his own strength and chose restraint. A man who could command a room, yet still ask permission before crossing the smallest emotional distance. And Adrian had never fallen in love with a woman because she was grateful to be chosen. He loved Claire because she chose herself first. That was what made her choice of him mean everything. On their first anniversary, Elena raised a glass at dinner and announced that the marriage was obviously her greatest achievement. Adrian objected. Claire agreed with Elena just to annoy him. Matteo remained neutral for approximately 4 seconds. Then Sophia asked whether Uncle Adrian would have stayed single forever without Claire. The table went quiet. Adrian looked at his wife. Claire looked back. He smiled. Probably. Claire reached beneath the table and squeezed his hand. No, she said. You would have figured it out eventually. Adrian raised an eyebrow. That is generous. I am a generous woman. You once threatened a rug. It knew what it did. Elena laughed. Matteo looked at the ceiling. And Adrian Moretti, a man who had spent years believing love would eventually ask him to become less, sat in a noisy house beside a woman who had never once required him to shrink. Claire Bennett, who had spent years wondering whether she occupied too much space to be loved comfortably, leaned against him without making herself smaller. Neither of them had been too much. They had simply been waiting for a love large enough to tell the truth.